Professor of Artificial Intelligence at the Sapienza University of Rome. He's perhaps one of the, I think, perfect candidate. He was the perfect candidate. He was then selected. So he's the perfect person to give this year's invited talk in the joint sessions. Because of his background, he is really a KR person who's been publishing in KR and the use of formal methods, and he's a co-editor of the Description Logics Handbook. On the other hand, he's really a planning person. He's been researching novel schemes for planning and execution, in particular interleaving planning and execution, publishing in planning conferences. And finally, he is also an agent researcher, focused on the integration of knowledge, reasoning, planning, and execution monitoring all into a full, complete system that goes from sensing to acting to sensing to acting to sensing to acting until the battery runs out. Building on his wide expertise, DanieleNardi, who is now a vice president of the Federation, has been participating in RoboCup robotics leagues, in several of them, in the Soccer League, in the Rescue League, in the RoboCup at Home League. For those of you who are not familiar with these leagues, soccer, I'm sure you can imagine what it's like, but the Rescue and the RoboCup at Home Leagues, which are a little bit less familiar to many, they're incredibly tough from a scientific perspective. Not that soccer isn't, but the challenges are very different. And it's really amazing to see one person, one researcher who's have an active team in all of these different leagues. In fact, I'm trying too hard to imagine whether I could imagine any sort of formal logic, description logic guy doing robotics. I can't think of anybody else. He's really one of the few researchers that can seem to handle it all, from the breadth to the depth of the different fields, and it's a great pleasure to have him here, opening this joint day of AMAS and ICAPS. Please join me in welcoming Daniele.
Good morning. It is really a great honor for me to be here, and therefore I start by thanking ICAPS and AMAS organizers for giving me this opportunity. Then I'd like to say that I will not be able to make precise references to all the work and the robots that I will be presenting in this talk. So I apologize in advance for not mentioning all the people or that have contributed in some way to this body of work and to this presentation. Well, to put it briefly, my goal is that after this talk, you all go and do rescue robotics, okay? So I'll try to tell you what rescue robotics is like and why I think it's a very good framework to address important challenges in robotics that are relevant for these communities. Let me start with some basic terminology. Well, the definition is taken from the Handbook of Robotics, and it says that rescue robots serve as an extension of responders into a disaster, providing video and other sensory input data about the situation. It turns out that the technical term that's used by the first responders is search and rescue, SAR. I have to say that the robots are really search robots rather than rescue robots. They don't do very much about the rescuing itself, although they contribute to it. So that's why I decided, together with other researchers, to use the term disaster response robotics. But as a matter of fact, I'll be using rescue robotics no matter what I said now. And just to give you a little bit of terminology, user is specific to urban search and therefore has to do with situations with building collapse and things like this. Now, if you look at the possible disasters, unfortunately, the list is very long. The natural disasters and man-made disasters, sometimes you don't even know whether it's natural or man-made. It's just a disaster like the forest fires, for example. As for the natural disaster, here we have earthquakes, volcanoes, mudslides, floodings, tornado, hurricanes. For the man-made, you can think of nuclear, chemical, bacteriological, mines, recent oil spill in of these days. And you can big tunnel accidents, subway, train accidents, and generally all sorts of building collapses, like for gas explosions or anything like that. So you see here the Mont Blanc tunnel, just to remind some that it's close to Italy, and also something from the recent earthquake in Italy. This is a piece of a building of the university that you see here. And I have underlined those cases that are really very limited at this point, where rescue robots have actually been used, deployed in real disasters. So they're still not being used in many cases. And actually I've heard about this hope for getting robots to close the valve that is now would prevent all this oil from flowing out in the ocean. Here is, I don't really want to be emotional here, although we have to keep in mind that disasters are real disasters. And I really tried this myself when Robin Murphy called me to ask whether we could go and have a survey of the sites that were affected by L'Aquila earthquake last year. So I was a little bit reluctant in the first place, but then I think